The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's SLA Competitive Intelligence Division webinar. I'm Jim Miller. I'll be the host for your podcast for today. And today we are bringing you Going Beyond Google with Arthur Weiss. Arthur Weiss is the Managing Director of Aware, which specializes in marketing and competitive intelligence analysis and research training. Arthur holds an MBA as a chartered marketer with the UK's Chartered Institute of Marketing. So before we hear from Arthur, I just want to thank our sponsors who do so much for us here at SLA. Like Aurora WGC is a continuing sponsor of our webinar series, and today they'd like to spend a special offer to our friends and family here in SLA community by offering a special rate for their Reconverge G2 conference, which is next April, which may seem like a long way away, but 2019 will be here before you know it. And the need for information professionals to learn influence and storytelling skills never goes away. The 3-day conference will focus on building those skills by applying techniques like what you're going to hear today from Arthur into your action plan for your own role and organization. If you're not able to make a full commitment right now, but still want to reserve your spot, you can lock in a discounted registration by making a $95 deposit right now. Full details on registration are available at reconverge.net. So make sure you check that out, and hopefully we'll see you in Madison next April.
Okay.
And we're just having a few technical difficulties with Arthur's PowerPoint presentation. So we'll just get started here in a moment.
But I can start. What's it? Okay. Okay, whilst I'm waiting for this to start off, it literally a minute ago just crashed. I don't know why. Right, it looks as though it's going to be there now.
Hey guys, let me hop in. This is Eric. Jim, you said you have a copy of the slides.
Yep.
I'm going to make you presenter and see if we can't have you show your screen, and then we'll figure out how Arthur can. I'm going to go ahead and request keyboard and mouse control from you in doing so. Screen will go dark for a second there, and then when you show your screen, Jim, I will try and see if I can give Arthur control of your keyboard.
Perfect.
There it is. I see it. We're in the editing window. And if you go full screen presentation mode, Jim.
God, where is it?
So there you go. Start from the beginning. Yep, F5 will also do it. There we go. It is showing. Now, let's try and could you click on Arthur's name in the list of attendees, moderators, and then see if you can give him keyboard and mouse control in the little drop-down menu that should appear there.
And then at some stage, if my thing comes up, we'll switch back.
Oh, you know where it is? I'm sorry, Jim. I misled you. Look towards the top.
No,
Look
I
towards.
got it.
Oh, you got it? Okay. All right.
Kevin and Arthur.
Arthur, give it a go hitting your right arrow key to see if you can advance to slide 2.
All right.
There'll be a bit of a lag as the undersea cables grind away with bits going back and forth. And it's working.
Okay. So
I'm gonna go mute.
let's
Let
make
you guys
a
take it
start.
from here.
Thanks, Art.
Right. So the first lesson in any form of online searching is if something's going to go wrong, it will. And it's always going to be when you least expect it, least want it, and when it's going to be as awkward as possible to you. So that sort of segues into the first slide, because before you even start searching, you need to know a bit about what you're looking for. Now, this may seem kind of obvious, but it's sort of very basic CI principles. Now, if it's going to come up, I don't know, but it will eventually. It'll probably come about 3 or 4 times because I've been clicking several times. But I don't know why it's... So is it moving forward? Not yet. This is kind of awkward. Basically, what I'm saying is that before you even start searching, you need to know what you're looking for. So what intelligence, and we now have my one up, so we can probably use mine. I don't know if we can switch back so we don't get a lag. So what intelligence is needed? Why is it intelligence needed? Now that sounds obvious, but it isn't. Because before you start searching, are you looking for information on a competitor? Are you looking at information on a potential merger and acquisition? Are you looking for finances, technologies, trends? What sort of information are you looking for? And to answer that, you also need to know why it's needed. So if you're looking for merger and acquisition potential, the sort of information you're going to be looking for is completely different to what, or very different to what you're looking for if you're looking for information on a competitor. If you're looking for information on a potential prospect who you want to turn into a customer, again, the information is going to be different. So before you start searching, make sure you know why the intelligence is needed. The next few questions are also fairly obvious. When do you need the information? How is the information going to be used? Who wants the information? Because sometimes people want information in one format, sometimes they want another format. What's the priority? When you've got several different people calling you, asking you for something, who comes first? And ultimately, what's the bottom line? So answer these questions before you start searching. And that means that you need some form of plan. So plan your search, know what you're looking for, and make sure that you've actually thought it through. So the next question is, what are you actually looking for? What do you need to find? Are you looking for a needle in a haystack? Are you looking for one needle? Is it a metal needle? In which case, if it's a haystack, you can use a massive, great big magnet to get it out. But if it's a plastic needle, you can't. So you need to think what you're looking for, what the characteristics of what you're looking for are as much as possible, and that will help guide your search. The next slide gives, for me, the key information to finding what you're looking for. Understanding why information will be available. If you know why information will be available, that will help you find where it will be held or who will know it. So if you're looking for a person, what sort of people will know that information? If you hadn't a clue why information is going to be available, it's going to be much harder to find because what you put in for a search becomes harder. If you know why it's going to be available, you can go straight there. So that's the very first question you need to ask. If you're doing competitive intelligence, the next question is equally crucial. Can you obtain that information legally and ethically? And if so, how? And if you can't get it legally and ethically, what other sources of information is needed? And once you've got the intelligence, what sort of checks do you need to make sure that it's valid, it's true? What sort of analysis? So how are you linking one piece of information to another piece of information? And although these might seem obvious to experienced practitioners, it's still worth reviewing them. If you've got a client who's a bit uppity and you want to reassure them, one thing you can also do is create an information plan. So I've got a sample information plan and you adjust it to however your client wants or however you want on the next slide when it eventually comes up. If it does come up, which it should in a second. Come on. More keys. This is the problem with technology. Sometimes things don't always move
Jim,
as fast as you want.
Sorry to interrupt. Jim, you might just want to advance the slides for Arthur, and Arthur, it'll be much quicker for you to just say, Jim, advance, please, or advance or next or something like that, because what's happening is this is a bandwidth lag between the UK and Canada entirely. So if you're just telling Jim to advance his slides, that'll be much quicker. Sorry to interrupt.
Or can we go to my screen now, because I've actually got mine up?
We could try it. Let me see if I can make you more presenter. And Jim, I'm going to yank that away from you. And a slight pause. And Arthur, we see your screen.
So that should now be okay.
We can see your screen. Before you even start searching, we've got the slide up in edit mode. So if you go presentation mode, we should be able to let you take it from there. All right, I'll shut up. Thanks.
Right, so we've gone there. And now we shall go quite quickly as, right. So we talked about haystacks and we talked about why information will be available. So you could do a research plan. And this is very much a sample. The advantage in doing this is it becomes a contract between you and your client. So what's the research topic? What are you going to try and answer? What you're going to try and look for? What are the main sources that you're going to be looking for? And over time, this might change. But if you say, this is what I've done, and then you might need to go back if something comes up, but it means it becomes a dialogue. One of the key things about competitive intelligence is it shouldn't be a one-way process. There needs to be feedback links, and you need to speak to the client and let them know what's going on as much as possible. So if something new comes up that refines your research, means that what you're doing is going to be slightly different, you need to tell them, make sure they're aware, so nothing comes as a surprise at the end of the day when you give your final report. Not always possible, but I'm talking about an ideal situation where you're working closely with the client and informing them as things go along. The next thing is, what are you searching for? So you go onto Google and you pull up a list and you think, that list is what I'm looking for. Actually, you're looking for a container of information. So all a Google list is a list of containers, and each of those links is a potential container of information. It may be right, it may not be right. So when you're stuck, think, where might information be contained, and search for that container, not necessarily the information. So if it's going to be in a database, search for the database, not for the contents of the database. And that means that you're more likely to find information than if you're sort of searching for something which maybe sort of 3 or 4 levels down. Getting back to that, why is information available? There are a number of reasons. Probably the easiest is regulation. If there's a legal requirement to file information, then go to wherever that information is going to be held. So in most of Europe, there is a legal requirement to file financial information for small private companies. Somebody the same size as Aurora WDC or my company, we would be filing our information, and if you know where to look, you can find it. That's kind of different for a lot of places in the world, including the US. I once had a client that I'd signed an agreement saying what I would do and what I wouldn't do, and that everything would be above board and everything would be legal. I sent my client the report, and about a week later, their legal counsel called me up and said, "We're not going to pay you, Mr. Weiss. You breached the terms. There's no way you could have obtained that financial information legally. It's on a small private company, and you could not possibly have obtained that information." And I just said, "What?" By law, that information has to be provided, and it's very inexpensive. In the UK, it's free. And I had to send him the legal details, and he said, "Oh, we didn't know that." So it's always worth knowing what the legal requirements is. And sometimes they're surprising. I think my favorite surprising information is tax records on individuals. So not tax records on companies, but on everybody. And there are 4 countries in the world that file those that you can find individuals' tax records. 3 are Scandinavia, so Norway, Sweden, Finland. The 4th was brought in as an anti-corruption method, and that's Pakistan. And it's about a 40 megabyte database of everybody in Pakistan, just one line, how much they pay tax. Not very easy to use, not very useful, but if you know it's there and you want to find information on Pakistan, it could be useful. The next type of information availability is where there's an expectation that something's going to be provided. So there's an expectation there will be a website, and there'll be an expectation there is certain things on that website. So look for that. Propaganda, and in that I'm going to include marketing. So any form of public information, news, message propagation is going to be out there for the home market or the foreign market. And then people want to blow their own trumpet, so there's community social needs. And from a competitive intelligence perspective, serendipity, a lucky accident. And we'll come to that a bit later, how to spot some of those lucky accidents where somebody's been careless and put information on that they shouldn't have put on. So finishing this off, essentially, when you're planning your research, think strategically. Why will the information be there? And what sort of resources would you need to check to find it out? If you're not finding something quickly, is it that information's not there, or is it that you're doing something that you've always done before, and in this case, it's not going to work? So don't follow any process blindly. And ultimately, you need to know what you're trying to achieve, when to stop, what's going to satisfy the intelligence requirements. All of that should be done before you even start searching. Be aware also the importance of searching. So the idea that you're not looking for data, you're looking for intelligence that's going to lead to insight. That's where the value is, and that's where the cost is. So consider that when you're searching. It's little bits of information that together make up the whole picture. So now we're moving on to, I suppose, the meat, going beyond Google. Most people, when they search Google, they only get 10 results. I'm going to show how in a second you can get much more. A lot of people ignore the phrase and Boolean searching. I think now most people know, especially most CI people, put your keywords in quotes, quotation marks. But also consider using the word or the minus sign to exclude things. Often excluding something that keeps coming up will mean that what gets left is what you actually want. Use Google's operators like in title, in URL, in text, and so on. And I'm going to give some examples of some of these later. Or look for PDF or PowerPoint files. A useful operator is the asterisk sign, which is a wild card. So if you want to find Donald or Ivanka Trump, you could put Donald asterisk Trump, and that will bring not just Donald, but Donald J. Trump, Donald and Ivanka Trump, and so on. Consider also, if it's a foreign language, using translate.google.com, or if you use some things like Chrome, Safari, Firefox, you can actually put a plugin that will translate web pages completely, without doing anything else. Always be willing to go back and check, because sometimes the translations are a bit funny, so do a back translate. Sometimes there'll be a spelling mistake. One of the options in the tools menu is verbatim, which allows you to search exactly as you type in. And don't ignore other search engines. Bing is particularly good for some things. If you're looking in Russian or in any Cyrillic language, Yandex is great. DuckDuckGo, if you want to stay anonymous. Don't also ignore things like Google News, Google Scholar. Consider synonyms. Again, I'm going to come to that a bit later. An odd thing is duplicating search terms or changing the order of search terms. As a trivial example, put into Google Paris Hilton and see what comes up. Now change the order of search to Hilton Paris, and you should get a completely different list. Sounds obvious, but people often don't think that just changing the search order is going to change what you get. And I like using the Paris Hilton, Hilton Paris as a easily visible way of showing how search order makes a difference. You can also do Paris, 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 Hilton, and you'll get different results because you're stressing the word Paris becomes important. So a quick question, if people want to type away, we can. I mentioned about synonyms. So what do you call this? If anyone wants to type what they call, I'd be curious to see what comes up. So I don't know if anything comes like this. Flash drive is one, jump drive, thumb drive, USB, USB stick, flash stick, memory stick, disk on key. I think the first name many years ago was disk on key. If you're trying to find patent information and you put the wrong thing in, then you won't find everything you're looking at. So if I put in a flash drive and the article I'm looking at says memory stick, it probably won't come up unless Google has actually, or Bing, or the search engine you're using has actually said that's the synonym. Now I'm using that as a unusual example, but it's much more common than that. So if I'm asked to look for something, let's say something, oh, I need to know what the latest treatments for lung cancer are. If you're looking for the latest treatments for lung cancer, you put in the word lung cancer, you're going to get consumer articles. Put in the word pulmonary carcinoma and you'll get medical articles. So always think, is there a technical term? So moving on. I said about improving search. The first thing you want to think about is changing your settings. Most people, when they search, they only get 10 results per page. So you never go beyond 30 results, maybe 40 if you're keen. I will routinely look at 200, 300, occasionally even more, because what you do is you change the results per page as comes up here. So change that results per page from 10 to 100. And so that your results don't overwrite themselves, change the where results open into open each selected result in a new browser window. That's the first change. I would also make sure that the region you're looking at is changed, normally current region, but if you want to look at one country only, you could change it to that country. I always have safe search off because you never know what might be viewed as unsafe, or certainly not safe for work that might be relevant. My wife was a graphic artist. She once was looking up Aphrodite because she wanted a picture of the statue of the Aphrodite. Lots of unsafe things came up, but the other way goes round. She worked for a cancer organization, and if she'd put in words for breast cancer, she'd have probably found very, very little, because if safe search was off, you wouldn't come things like that. So again, it's being aware of what's happening when you're doing a search. Consider changing the language. So what language are you searching in? English? Maybe if you're looking for something in Chinese, search in Chinese, use Google Translate or Bing Translate to change the into the relevant language, and consider what's coming up there. So that's a bit about Google. But what about Bing? The standard thing on Bing is the menu thing at the top, on the top right. If you click on that, you'll eventually come up with Bing search settings, similar sort of things to Google. So you can show how many results appear on a page, open results from search windows in the new tab, and so on. And the default is 50, unlike Google where it's 100. Other search tools, I mentioned DuckDuckGo. There are other ones as well. So there's Yandex for Russia or Cyrillic languages. There's Baidu for China. And again, consider using Bing to translate. If you're doing a reverse image searching, you can do that on Google, but there's a specialist called TinEye, which is worth looking at. It's not great. It's becoming better. If you're looking for podcasts, there's a search tool called Listen Notes that allows you to search inside the podcast. So it converts the podcast into text, so that the voice becomes text, and it's a way of searching for what's there. Never exclude YouTube for searching video. Sometimes, in one case, I actually found the answer for a client on YouTube. My client was looking for information on suppliers and quality control, and they'd found absolutely nothing. I thought a bit about the company, said this is a company that is quite with it, quite go-getting. They like to use images a lot. They like to use video. So I'll search on YouTube, and there are a number of videos interviewing suppliers about their quality control. So if you looked at their web page, nothing. If you did a standard Google search, nothing. But going on to Google, we got the exact answers of what we were looking for. Zanran I'm going to come to. It's for semi-structured data graphs and table. And I'm going to spend a bit of time on the Wayback Machine, archive.org. Always consider paying for information. So Factiva, Dialog, LexisNexis, and several other sites of that type. And if you're looking for people, it's not just LinkedIn. But if you're in France, look for Viadio. In Germany and a few other countries, there's Zing. And then there's special sites like Pipel and Intellius. The next thing is stop looking at things the way you're used to looking at them. So don't look at things from your own company's perspective. Switch your perspective round and try and see things from the perspective of what you're looking into. So your customer's perspective, your competitor's perspective, your supplier's perspective. Because sometimes what you see is actually completely different to what is reality. As in this example of Donald Trump, which has been slightly photoshopped. Beware of bias. This is a very simple cheat sheet. And there are lots more, so it's just sort of a fairly simple way of thinking. If there's too much information, then you may miss something that's crucial, because you tend to only notice the changes, things that are odd, things that keep repeating, and beware of confirmation bias. If there's too little information, you might fill in the gaps, but is your filling in going to be correct? You might not change your current mindset, so you'll fill in gaps with what you actually believe, which may not be reality. And if there's not enough time, you might not do things properly. You might just make assumptions. There's a recent cartoon that came up that illustrates how people search. So I've heard the rhetoric from both sides. Time to do my own research on the real truth. And you click on the first link and it's what you believe, and often it isn't. So going beyond Google. How about doing a search for case studies? So put the word in title and then in quotes, in title : case study, and you may find case studies of the target company. Or put in the word file type : PDF. So these are the sorts of things that you might want to look for on a website or on parts of a website. So these are areas you might want to focus on. The other thing you want to look at is how a website is actually structured. This is a real example that I came across fairly recently. There was a word, something I was looking for, and I noticed that there was a Acrobat file, a PDF file came up with a title that was a date and then board minutes.pdf. And I thought, oh, nice. I wonder if there's any more like that. And I looked at the structure of the page, and they all were in a WordPress, so WP content, uploads, and then the date or the year and the month. And you could upload and look at pretty much their whole board, every month's board meeting. Actually, it was every quarter's board meeting in this particular case. That's what I mean by serendipity. It only happens if you actually notice things like that. So you'll sometimes see a web page, company.com/page1.html, page2.html. What's on page 3, 4, 5, and 6? Often those pages aren't indexed on Google, or if they are, there's so little that's easily searchable that they'll be way down the search listing at number 256. So you'll never spot it. If you look at the structure, you might come across it. And I'm going to give some actual examples of this later. Think about the website. Is it a company website? Is it a brand site? Look at their Facebook pages. What are they saying? How do they promote themselves? What do they say about themselves on LinkedIn? I mentioned YouTube already. Sister company pages. Compare Pepsi.com to PepsiCo.com. They're completely different sort of sites. So now let's go a bit deeper. And I'm just going to give a couple of examples here. But what are the web tools that you could use beyond the standard search engines? And one of the most useful is known as the Wayback Machine, archive.org. So you type in a website there. And what that brings you up with is a list of sites or pages that have been indexed, showing what the page looked like at a previous time. In this case, I'm going to use at whitehouse.gov, and some of the things you can see. Each of those green circles and yellow circles, and also sometimes blue circles, are pages that have been indexed or that the Wayback Machine knows about. So we're going to have a look at the White House page from 2017. From 2006. And this is what it looked like in 2006. Step forward, and it's slightly more colorful. And this is 2013, so quite a few years forward. Go forward again, and it's changed again. So if you compare the two. And if you're trying to understand a strategy, sometimes by seeing how web pages change over time, you can get clues to a strategy. And that's what it was like in August 2017. Again, different. Something else you'll see is that there's a couple of extra things when you, let's go back here. It says summary of whitehouse.gov and sitemap of whitehouse.gov. Click on the sitemap and you get that. And that enables you to see the sort of structure of the web page and what the various things are. So here, there aren't many pages on presidential actions for 2017, but it lets you get a feel for what things are. If you put your mouse over each of those colored things, it says what the page is going to be, and you get an idea how many pages have actually been indexed. The summary gives you what the files are. And this can be particularly useful if you're not sure what sort of files you want to be looking for. I would routinely search for PowerPoint, Excel, Word docs, always PowerPoint, always PDFs, not always the others, but this will tell you what might be there. So here you can see on these the pie chart that there are Excel files, not very many. It's under 0.25% of all the White House pages are Excel files. But this is what they look like. So if you do cite whitehouse.gov, file type :XLS, you get a list of, in this case, 219 Excel files, and you click on that and Excel will open up. I noticed also that there's a format, so it's whitehouse.gov/site/whitehouse.gov. What are all the files in there? So if you do in URL, that will allow you to see all the files in that particular directory. And sometimes, again, that can give you indicators because sometimes they're not easily findable. And to give you a sort of practical example of how these can be used, I'm going to do the same thing with GlaxoSmithKline, with GSK. And here I'm going to be looking, they've got 4 pages of different sorts of files. And I'm looking at PowerPoints, and there I've got the word "or" in, so I'm looking at site.gsk.com, and these are new PowerPoints or old PowerPoints. And again, I get not very many, but each of those can be very, very useful. I'm going to give an example in a second what happens sometimes if you're very lucky with a PowerPoint file. And again, you've got a format, so you've got GSM downloads and media, so I'd have a look at some of those as well. So here I'm looking for Excel files, and again, I probably would never search for those Excel files because they're all in, I think, Russian, but there might be some information in there that you can actually use. And I said if you click on an Excel file, this is a real example. I was doing a search and I came across a PowerPoint presentation in a target company. You click on, and I noticed there were a couple of graphs in the target company, in the PowerPoint. I clicked on I looked at the properties and realized there was an embedded Excel file. Click on the embedded Excel file or the graphic, and up opens Excel. And it wasn't just the chart which was in the PowerPoint, but there were also a number of other sheets. In this case, complete list of suppliers, plus phone numbers, contact people, and the spend of this particular company. It's a major multinational with each of these suppliers over a multi-year period. This is what I mean by serendipity. If you come across stuff like this, you need to record how you got it. You need to have a complete audit trail, save the search parameters, save what you did, take screen prints of the lot, because any system admin who realizes somebody's seeing this sort of stuff is likely to block it. And essentially, you've discovered online stuff that should never have been online in the first place, and you have issues of confidentiality. It is public information. It is free to use information that somebody has basically made confidential information open. So from a legal perspective, you're okay until it's blocked. So you need to make sure that you have some form of audit trail. I mentioned quickly Zanran. Zanran gives you semi-structured data. So I'll give an example. One of the things to be aware of is how websites make money. Google makes money from advertising. A lot of websites start off with venture capital. So they've got investors, the aim being they're going to make money somehow by selling their software. And sometimes they then go offline and disappear. I suspect this will happen to Zanran because the next screen is what was there originally, and what you're seeing now was much newer. So this was what it started with. And if you put in a search, and in this case, I'm going to put in competitive intelligence, you get a screen like this. If you put your mouse on each of those little images on the left, you get what those images look like. And what it's doing is it's finding web pages only currently in English, with graphics, so with graphs, with tables, with certain images, what they call semi-structured type data. So not text and not a picture, but something in the middle. So here there's a little graphic on there from one particular website, and then the next one, third one down, gives you a graph like this. So it's a way of finding graphs. Financials, lots of different web pages. Be aware of some of them. So you should all know the sec.gov. I mentioned about the UK. beta.companieshouse.gov.uk allows you to find free information on all UK companies or all UK limited companies for free. If you're looking for European businesses, there's the European Business Registry, which will give you links to paying sites to get the same sort of information. I'm going to come back to the investigative dashboard in a second. And then you've got Yahoo Finance, Google Finance, Wolfram Alpha. If somebody says, I want to know a bit about this company, give me it in 5 minutes, put in the name of the company and Wolfram Alpha, and sometimes you'll get a stock report and a summary of information. ADVFN, you have to register for. It gives you some nice graphics of the financials. So again, it's an interesting site. This is an investigative dashboard. It's linked to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. It's aimed at journalists investigating fraud, corruption, anything like that. But it's a useful database for finding sites in any country in the world. So what you're looking for is the find online sources, sometimes search for leads, but the find online sources is probably better. And what will come up is a catalogue of research databases. So if I click on, for instance, Europe, this gives me a list of the databases within Europe. So I've got the databases they hold on Albania, Andorra, Austria, and it carries on for the whole of Europe. It's not totally comprehensive, but if you're looking for a database in a particular country and you just don't have a clue, this is a good place to go. I mentioned about paying for information. It's essential to pay for information. If you're looking for news information, sources like Factiva, Dialogue, LexisNexis, or Legal Information, you will not get comprehensive information for free. Or if you do, it's going to take you a long time to find it. So pay for the information. If you're serious about finding it, you need to be willing to pay. Lots of different commercial databases. I just mentioned the news aggregators, financial information providers like 10K Wizard can make things much easier. Marketresearch.com, if you're looking for market research data and you're not sure who's publishing it. Westlaw, LexisNexis, various scientific, technical, and medical databases. And then there's lots of specialist databases. If you're looking for import-export stats, there's things like Panjiva and Peers. And, you know, get to know the databases that you think you should be using on a regular basis, subscribe to them. Next, we'll look briefly at social media, and then we're going to finish off. So don't ignore social media. Make sure you have access to social media and keep aware of how things are changing. Several years ago, MySpace was the bee's knees, and I actually found some critical information on MySpace on behalf of a client. It wasn't anywhere else. It was put up by a user who wanted to let all his colleagues know a bit about what he was doing, but it was public information. This gives you an idea of some of the social media tools that are out there. There are a hell of a lot. I've used most of these at some point or other, not all. I've not really found much on TripAdvisor for competitive intelligence, but if you're working for a hotel, then that's going to be crucial. I regularly use sites like Glassdoor, and then there's things like Reddit. Elo is like a Facebook wannabe. It's probably going to die, but be aware of what some of these are. And consider what you're looking for. So this just gives you an idea of some of the places you might want to go. So if you're looking for people, obviously LinkedIn, but Facebook also. And sometimes you'll get much more information about a person before you interview them. So if you're going to be doing a one-to-one interview, phone or face-to-face, get to know a bit about that person, what their hobbies are, what they want to do, what their recent achievements are. If they've been stupid and not updated their privacy settings so that you can look and see, you might find something relevant before you do the interview, or even about the company. There's also company pages on Facebook that you shouldn't ignore. And I'm just, that's just some of them. When we come to people searching, lots and lots of sources. There's obvious sources like the business network sites. I mentioned LinkedIn, Viadio for France, Zing. There's also what used to be jigsaw.com. They've now changed the name to, I think it's connect.data.com. But if you put jigsaw.com, you still get it. And that gives you a business card for individuals. Then there's people search databases. I mentioned Pipel, Intellius, social media sources. Those are the obvious ones. But what about somebody who's mentioned in a news report? And I'll give a real example of that. I was asked recently about to find some information about a private equity firm in Malaysia. And it turned out that this particular company was not the actual private equity firm. It was a vehicle that had been set up to invest in a particular pharmaceutical company, and it was owned by another genuine PE firm. How did I find the genuine PE firm? Well, on some of the documents, it mentioned an individual's name. Searching for that individual's name, found the related private equity company. This was something that was like a 5-10 minute job. I'd have probably found it if I'd have been willing to purchase the financial information. But before I did that, I thought, let's have a look, see what's there. Consider who an inventor is in a patent. Obviously academics, conference speakers. So all of these are ways of finding names of people to interview. If you're stuck for a source, this is ideas for finding new or unfamiliar sources. Look for a site like Quora. Quora is a question and answer site, or ask the question on Twitter. The idea is if a source exists, somebody will know it. So be willing to ask. So here's an example. Where can I find free export-import data of shipping for international trade businesses? In fact, there isn't very much. You normally have to pay for that sort of information. But Quora will have told you that some of the best information sources you have to pay for. You can also add the word portal or database to your search query. So here I put in, and this is on Bing. And the reason I'm using Bing here is to show some of the differences between Bing and Google. Bing allows you to put in proximity search. So I put in importer within 4 words of the word exporter, intelligence or information, database or portal. Bing obeys Boolean and it listens to brackets or follows brackets. Google does not. There is no point doing a search like this on Google. It will not work. But on Bing, it obeys Boolean and you can do a much more complex search. And on there, you've got, I think about the 6th level down, you've got peers, which I mentioned, and some of the other sites that will give you information on import, export are also going to be there. This one is another example looking at clinical trials, a bit easier. And this one, I just did it on Google. Before you go, make sure you've checked the data. Is it reliable? So data, come on. Come on. It's not moving on. I seem to be stuck. Don't know why. Oh, I've got a little mouse. Right. It's done it again. It's done it again. Right. There was a problem with Microsoft. I think that particular slide was a bit too heavy. So I'll talk you through what the checking the data should be, because this finishes it off anyway. It's the final slide. basically, are you looking for one source? Are you looking for multiple sources? If it's a newspaper report, then multiple sources, it might be one source, it might be a press release. So check that sort of data. Consider also, are there any mistakes in the data? Why was information available? Information is not available unless somebody wants it to be available. So find out why it was available. Was there any evidence of bias? And that's also your own bias. Always be aware of your own biases because they can color how you perceive information. Are there conflicting points of view or different points of view? And are there other ways of saying things? So consider things like that as well. Let's just get to that slide again. Be aware of what truth is. So there's a difference between how you perceive things, how other people perceive things. The aim of competitive intelligence is to get to a complete unbiased picture. And does information agree with or disagree with other information? Has the source been reliable in the past? So when you get a piece of information, score it. Is it accurate and trustworthy? If it's accurate, give it an A for accuracy, give it a 1 for trustworthy. If it's inaccurate or poor source, probably false, you might give it an E5. And every piece of information you can give a score, and that way you get some sort of idea whether to trust information, and that might change as you get other information coming in. So to finish off, always be willing to think differently. This comes from the old Apple advert, think different, and when you download this, where it hopefully will work and won't crash on you, you can actually play the video. So be willing to think differently so that you see things in a different way. And if you want to improve your searching, I've got at the bottom a number of sources for staying up to date. There's a great site called searchresearch1.blogspot.com from Dan Russell, a Google expert who gives a number of search problems every couple of times a month, and it's a way of practicing. So I've finished. Any questions?
Well, thanks for that, Arthur. It's fairly overwhelming, actually. It's very, very good. I just want to remind people that this actual webinar is also going to be, it has been recorded, and it will be available on the SLA CID website. So you can actually go back and check out all of the wonderful sources that Arthur has provided for us. I know it's a lot of information to go over. So I think that that's great. I mean, this is a stunning presentation as far as the number of actual sources that are there available to us. So take a good look at what is available here.
I'm just going to go to the previous page, as somebody's asked for that. I mean, all the slides can be downloaded.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so I mean, I've only given a selection of pages. There's one question: how do you go about the dangers of doing so? I'm trying to see what this question. Right, how do you go about convincing executives of the dangers of doing searches themselves? The best way is to do it better than they can. And I've had that where people have come to me and said, I don't think there's anything on there. And if you can show something very, very quickly. My favorite example was a client a few years ago who was trying to find some information on Japan. and they were searching and they gave up and they called me, we're trying to find this information on Japan. Is there any way that you can find it for us? And a couple of hours later, I called them back and said, I'm not sure. It didn't take very long to find this stuff. Is this what you were looking for? How did you find that so quickly? We spent 2 days looking for it and found nothing. The secret was I'd searched in Japanese. I don't speak a word of Japanese. I just used Google Translate to search in Japanese. Up came what I was looking for, which I then translated back. And some of the pages I was actually looking for had both Japanese and English in them, but because of the way things were being done, the English wasn't being indexed. And that's why my client couldn't find anything. So convince executives by showing the mistakes that they come up with. That example I gave of bias and, the first slide must be the relevant one, or something in the first 10 slides, or even make sure they know how to use Wikipedia. So if you're looking at a Wikipedia page, go to the very bottom. What are the references? Is it a biased page? Controversial pages tend not to be biased because they put a lot of effort in making sure that it's fairly balanced. But pages that most people don't look at may be inaccurate. And if it's a subject that's biased, then the chances are the whole page is going to be biased. I think there's probably a page on flat Earth belief, which is going to be pretty biased in favor of flat Earth. So look at the links and assess the links and assess the sources. And that question, why is the information available in the first place? What's the reason information is put out there? So you might have to work with the executive to say, why was this information there before, to work out whether you can trust them. Right, there's another question. I don't know whether anyone from Google registered for this. That was one question. Be nice to think they did, but I'm not slagging Google off. I like Google. It's my default search engine. I just use others as well because they all have slightly different plus and minuses. Okay.
So, Arthur,
head of the hour.
Yep. So I think so unfortunately we've run out of time for questions. I just wanted to let people know that the web address for the SLA CID website is ci.sla1.org, and the slides and the recording will be available there. And I also just want to thank everybody for attending. Arthur has provided his contact information for you there, so if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to Arthur. And again, I also want to thank our sponsor, Aurora WDC, and want to ask you to make sure to check out their site at reconverge.net for their upcoming Reconverge conference, which will be held in 2019 in lovely and beautiful Madison, Wisconsin. So thank you everybody for attending today, and hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'm sure you're now off to running and checking out all the great sources that Arthur has provided for you to see what information is all out there. So thank you again, Arthur, and thank you for everybody for attending today.
Okay, thank you.